Welcome, PeterCast listeners, to entry 16, the final entry of Training Camp Journals with Ren. I am your host, Ren Daxt. A little bit of a sad day. Like I said, it's the last entry of this Training Camp Journal. Brent and I talked about it very briefly, and this sort of came about on a whim, as quite honestly, sort of a lot of our ideas do. But we appear to be two guys that once they decide, it gets put together real quick. So 16 entries later, and this is the last one. I hope everybody enjoyed it. I'm going to start off with some announcements. The InstantCast show, which we do right after every game. That's not true. We do it the same day of every game. So if it's like a day game, it's usually at 9 o'clock. If it's a night game, we'll start right after the game. This week, Brent bought season tickets, so this week he will be in Tampa for the Cleveland game, and it's a 3.5-hour drive. So we looked into some options of doing it at the stadium. That's a definite no-no. He was talking to his ticket agent at one point. Doing it at One Buck Place, sort of in the media room was discussed, but that hasn't come to fruition. I'm not really sure how exactly that conversation ended. So what we decided to do is just go ahead and do it Sunday, instead of Brent, driving, close to an hour out of his way to my house in St. Pete, then setting up, then doing the InstantCast. First off, he would have to leave the game early, and then he would have to have almost an hour extra drive back to Jacksonville. So since it's a night game, what we decided to do is we're just going to go ahead and do it Sunday. So it's going to be Sunday night at 9. It's not going to be exactly, a few hours or directly after the game, so some of the feelings may not be raw, but, it could give us a little better coverage of the game. Give you the fans and us to maybe even sort of compartmentalize. I always mess up on that word. Either sort of calm down if we're angry about something, or calm down if we were too high about something that happened in the game. So we'll see. So for this game, the Cleveland preseason game, the InstantCast show will not be airing right after. It'll be Sunday night, the next night, at 9 o'clock. We have posted it on Facebook and Twitter, and we will continue to do so just to keep you guys in the loop. I have another announcement. This is pretty exciting for all Bucs fans. What the Buck, who has sort of been the podcast gold standard, I think this is their 12th year of podcast. I think they were podcasting for podcasts or called podcasts. And the Buckaholics, who, of course, most of us found out who they were during that San Diego Chargers road game when the whole lower bowl behind, the Buccaneers bench was all just, pewter and red, and you could hear them cheering through the TV. So what the Buckaholics, and of course I'm sure everyone by now knows who the stick carriers are. They had that very impressive camp takeover day, cheered the whole time. Everything they said they do, they did. They've all sort of joined forces and are inviting all Bucs fans to their tailgate. What the Buck has been doing this tailgate for years. Derek Fournier, the creator of What the Buck, has always said it's a Hall of Fame, the only Hall of Fame tailgate in Tampa Bay. I'm not exactly sure what that means. I'm pretty sure it's some type of an award that you get, from an outside source. But I've been to a tailgate of his, and they're extremely impressive, basically. And there always has something to do with charity as well. You make a donation at the door, then the drinks are free, the food's free. They always have a pirate ship there. This year, I hear that they're going to have a stage, and there's going to be concerts. So basically what they're doing is they're bringing in the Buckaholic fan base and the Stick Carrier fan base, and this is sort of going to be headquarters for these three fan bases and anyone else, any Bucs fans. They're really preaching this unity, and it's going to be headquarters for the tailgate before the game. And then what they're doing, they're going to be they're going to sort of tear down the tailgate an hour before the game, and then they're all going to walk in together. So this is probably going to be 1,000 people. Maybe more. They have organized chants. They're all going to go in through the same gate. Then there's some organization about how they go from one side of the stadium to the other, and they're going to congregate in a few sections because they're going to be in there so early. It's not like they're taking people's seats. They're going to congregate in sections and do some roll call chants and things like that. And then everyone's going to break up and go to their sections. But you'll be seeing on social media very shortly from What the Buck, Buckaholic, and Stick Carriers, probably from Justin Pulowski. He was the creator of the Stick Carriers. Off his Twitter feed as well. All the Facebook groups for these three fan base organizations. They're going to come up with certain chants for certain things, like on third down, like, this is what you chant. And eventually, probably it's going to take maybe 2, 3, 4 games, but by the end of the year, definitely the second half of the season, I think all the Bucs fans, what they're looking to do is get everyone coordinated. So when it's third down and our defense is on the field, like it's going to be deafening. They have a chant for the kickoff. So it's in the plans, and with the social media the way it is now and how easy it is to spread an idea, not only from me to you, for neighbors, or we work together, but you can spread it from me to somebody in California, or me to somebody in the UK, from me to somebody in China, just as fast, if not faster, just by a touch of a button. So be looking for these chants and organizations. If you have any questions about where the tailgate is, you can go to whatthebuck.net. There's a map. There's also some very brief rules. I believe basically the big rule is don't be a dick. Everyone's welcome, just don't be a dick. Like, that's pretty much the rules. And then donate when you come in, because they always go to charity. I know they've done backpacks before. I know last year they had a bicycle drive. They also had a peanut butter drive, and then they got in contact with I don't want to say, I don't know what's the PC word for like homeless women. I don't, is it endangered women, single mothers, places that are in shelters like that. So they got, they had to drive for diapers, baby blankets, formula, things like that. So that's where all that money goes to. So if you want to sort of understand a little more, you can go to What the Bucks podcast, whatthebuck.net. You can find their podcast. The Buckaholics are there. Justin Plows, who's Stick Carriers there. Christian, who is now a captain for the Stick Carriers, sort of takes some of the responsibility off of Justin's shoulders because he has a full-time job as well. And Derek Fournier from What the Buck, they all got together and had a podcast and made this announcement last night. That's the real reason this podcast, my pod, Entry 16 is coming out today, because I wanted to hear what they had to say, and if I sort of knew what was coming, but I wanted to make sure I heard it, and then I wanted to get it out, to you guys if there are. I'm sure there's not many, probably just a handful, but if there are some of you that don't follow those podcasts and just follow mine or the Pewtercast or Talking Knox or the InstantCast, I can get it out to you so you can, if you do make it to a home game, if you are in the area, you can even go to the tailgate, make your donation, hang out with Buck fans, and then if you don't have a ticket, then the tailgate ends an hour before kickoff, so you can still get in your car and go. Maybe you can make it home and watch it at home, or maybe find other people at the tailgate that don't have tickets either, and you guys can group together and go to the local wing joint up the road or sports bar up the road, or maybe there's somebody there that has a house on the water and has TVs everywhere, and 10 or 12 of you get together and go hang out at Joe Schmo's house and watch the game. So it's really a community thing. It's about bringing all Bucks fans together at one place. So it was good to hear. Like I said, if you have any questions, go to whatthebuck.net and listen to the podcast that was actually on last night. And finally, even though it's the last entry for me, some of you may not know because I haven't talked about it a lot on these pods, is I also write about the Buccaneers. I write for the Peter Plank, and I also write for whatthebuck.net. The Peter Plank is sort of under the banner of Fansided. They are all pretty much fan-based writers, and they're all sort of grouped together under this one ginormous website. So any team in the league has, just about every team of the Big Four has sort of this fan-based writing site. The Peter Plank's been around for quite a few years. There are 8 to 12 writers there right now, somewhere in that range, maybe a little less. There might be 7. It's a little bit fluid, especially at the beginning of the season. People are getting promoted or moving to other sites and things like that. So, but they've been around a long time. There's lots of content. There's stuff that comes out daily. So if things happen, like breaking news, such as today, some of you might have heard that Gerald McCoy is having an MRI for his hip groin area. There is a piece that's being written, and it might be up now. So it's that type of site. I'll be doing, since I've been all the practices, I'll be doing the 53-man roster predictions for the Peter Plank. It will come out sometime sometime after the Cleveland game and before the what is the fourth? Who are we playing the fourth preseason game? Is it the Redskins? I don't know. That's terrible of me. But before that last preseason game, because honestly, I'm afraid that the cuts are going to start coming that morning. So if I wait till the last fourth preseason game and then write the article and then put it up, and yes, I could get it up before the cuts start coming, but if the cuts start coming like 8 in the morning, no one's really going to get a chance to read it. So it's going to come probably a few days before that fourth preseason game. I'm also going to I've seen a couple of 53 man roster predictions so far. I know Peter Port did one. I read it. Mine's going to be pretty close to that, but I'm also going to do a practice squad. Plus, I'm going to do guys that are going to be on the PUP list designated to return. There's 2 of those guys that can come back this year. They can start practicing with the team week 6, and then come back, week 8. So I'm going to go a little deeper than normal. Like I said, I'm going to actually it's going to be a 11-man practice squad because that player from Germany who was born in Germany went to college in Wyoming and now is with the Bucks. Like he's guaranteed to make the team. Like we've been running with a 91-man roster because he didn't count against the 90-man roster, and he's going to make the practice squad. And that's why, so he doesn't count against it. So the practice squad is actually going to be 11 players this year. Because of that guy from Germany / University of Wyoming. So that's all I have for announcements. So let's get into the early stuff. Let's finish up on the building. The building is pretty much just where I left it last time. The skins, I think all the skins on that's going to go on before they, other things start to proceed. I told you before that the scoreboard's up. There's, the 45-second clock's up. It looks like the bathroom structures are up inside. They're moving dirt around. They've got the machine in there that's pounding, the foundation down, all the dirt that's in there now and compacting down for the next layer to come on. But today they were putting in, they cut a hole in the roof and they put in a vent. At first I thought it was a skylight, but then as I was leaving practice, the skylight actually had a cap on it. It looks like a hood that you would see like on the top of a restaurant. Now, obviously, the Bucks don't need to pump, all this heat and gas out so it doesn't flow into the dining room. So I'm assuming it has something to do with the air conditioning. It's not a handler. I mean, it's not the air conditioning handler. There's no way like that structure could probably support the weight of the amount of air handlers they're going to need to cool that place down. So That's all really about I got is they cut a hole in the roof, put a vent on top of it for you. A little anticlimactic, but it's coming along. They said it's going to be done September. They never said like to September 1st because obviously it's going to be done then. Uh, so as long as it's done by October 1st, I guess they'll hit their mark. And I'm sure as soon as it gets close or is done, the media will be invited to go in and take pictures and look, and there'll be a press conference and interview. I'm sure there'll be some cheerleaders there in the background and Captain Fear and all that kind of stuff. Uh, so about a month away, I would say. It's about 30 days away. So that could be something you could be looking forward to. Um, Now, remember when I told you that the experience during sort of like the season ticket holder member day was totally different than it was, in the general mission. So during season ticket holder day, if you have season tickets that aren't in club or suite, you're in the general mission section, and then the club and the general mission side, the club and the suite side, are sort of that VIP area. Which on a normal practice day, if you're club or just have season tickets, you sit in the general admission, and that sort of VIP area is only for suite holders. Uh, and I told you how they have, like the tea and the coffee and the iced coffee and soda and juice and muffins and granola bars, like 5 flavors of granola bars and all those things over there. I come to find out that was sort of the uh, B buffet. So when it's just sweet holders over there, they have things like breakfast burritos. Like they bring out the chafing dishes, with the tops on and the tongs. So it's like a full uh, spread over there. I'm starting to think that the kitchen, which would be silly not to think that, but they that it's a big part of a football organization. Um, I mean, they feed the media guys, during game day. There's a few times like when they're in there for the draft, and I think once a week they put out a buffet for the media members there as well, like during the regular season. Then they got to feed all the players, and then the cafeteria. Also, all the people that work in that building, eat there too. And then you have the executive chef who is probably trying to come up with recipes that fit in to these guys' specific diets. I saw something not too long ago where you kind of you're in the cafeteria and you go up to the line, and the label where it tells you what it is, like this is broccoli and rice, like you're at a Chinese buffet, but they have green, yellow, and red dots on it. So green would be the best for you. Yellow is like, this is good for you, but it, has some bad stuff. And then red's like, yeah, like you shouldn't be eating this. It's delicious, but don't only eat this. Like don't overindulge on this. It would be like maybe the candy bar of the buffet aisle. I'm just obviously that's not true, but but then you start thinking like now every day during open practice they had to prep food for suite members, and then it's just one of those things you really didn't think of until you actually are around it a lot. That they probably have a pretty big kitchen staff that's more than 10. I doubt it's more than 20, but on staff like all the time there at $1. So that's what I got for you. I just heard those breakfast burritos, and I was like, excuse me, and he's like, yeah, he's like, I was like, yeah, it's buffet day. So it was more of this, I guess, when the club members were allowed over there, it was just sort of more of a this is like little snack day. But apparently, there's this sort of like this full spread over there when it's just suite members only. A few more things before we start to get into practice itself. The 2 days before the last practice, there was no freezy pops. Like they didn't pass any out. Now it really wasn't that hot, and one of the reasons it wasn't that hot is because the last 3 days were very light. School had started. The practices were during the week. So it wasn't that surprising that only, about 1,000 people showed up during the day. And so you didn't have someone sitting right next to you, getting that, that basically 100 degree of body heat, like on the right of you, the left of you, and on each one of your front legs. Uh, so the Freezy Pops weren't in such high demand. I think they were running low because they only came out on the last day, and they were giving them away. Like they were giving people 3 at a time, 4 at a time. Like here, like we don't need these anymore. There's no more people are coming. There's no more fans coming to camp. We're not going to keep them, at $1 for a year until next year. So, yeah, this is the last of them. Take them. And I actually had my first one. Somebody had like 5 and handed me one. I denied it at first, and he's like, I got 5, and I'm like, okay. And I had a lime one. It's just as you remember. It's cold. Tastes like sugary lime juice. So. No big there. Quan Alexander, who was out the last 2 practices, I saw him over by the guy who runs the playlist by the tower speakers. The speakers are very loud. In Jacksonville, you could barely hear them. And in Tampa, you really have to speak up to the person next to you. And they have them on both ends of the field, so there's really no getting away from them. But Quan was over there on the playlist, so I looked at him. I saw him over there, and he spent a good 2-3 minutes over there, sort of scrolling through and picking things. I guess of what he was doing. Sometimes it's sort of heavy into classic rock or songs that people like in their mid-30s and 40s would know, like maybe songs that came out when they were in college or in high school. To that day when Quan picked, it was nothing of the sort. I'm an idiot when it comes to music. The more modern, I don't mean modern as the type of music, I mean modern as most recently came out. The more modern music is, the dumber I become. So I am not embarrassed to say that I did not know one song that came out on the speakers that last day. But a lot of people did, and it was a good day at camp. It was a very high energy crowd for such a small I don't want to say a small crowd, but for light of a crowd as it normally is, especially on a Saturday or Sunday, it was good energy for that crowd. It was a nice, it was a fun day, sort of wrap up the whole thing. Lots of talking going on, lots of laughing back and forth, between strangers and things like that. So that was fun to see. And finally, I would like to say that Captain Fear, I have a new respect for that man. That man has some moves. I find mascots in the majority sort of annoying, to be honest with you. I understand their place. I understand what they do. I just don't find them funny or hilarious or even necessary, but I'm not saying get rid of them. I think they're a great part of sports franchises all around the world. But Captain Fear started on probably, let's say, the 50-yard line. And like I said, it was sort of a very fun crowd. And, people were pointing at Captain Fear and doing the, oh, you go, oh. And he danced very slowly, mind you, from the 50 all the way down to the end zone with different moves all the time. Like he knows how to dance. Like I wouldn't be surprised if there's a professional dancer in there. And God bless him, Jesus, it's hot out there, and he's in that suit. It could be a girl. They are in that suit. But at one point, he took a sword out of his belt, and this would really I have new respect for you, Captain Fear. He took a sword out of his belt, and then he laid on the ground with sort of his elbows propping up his whole entire body. So he was the only thing that was keeping him off the ground was his hands. So he was on his hands, like his elbows sort of underneath his body, and he basically was planking. Let's just say that. He was planking with his hands in the ground. Then he shuffled backwards on his hands for a good 10 yards and did it really quick in full costume in that heat after he had just broke it down for like 50 yards dancing. And after I saw that, I was like, you know what? Hats off to you, Captain Fear. So that's it, sort of the light stuff. Let's go ahead and get into players and the practice itself. Once again, I've sort of gone over everything that I have seen. If you want to know sort of what happened at practice, there's lots of people on Twitter you can follow. So these are just more observations as far as like touchdowns, drops, things like that. Overall, very quickly, there were a lot of drops, especially by the tight ends. Um, but that didn't mean people didn't flash as well. Ryan Smith had like a breakup. Kendall Beckwith like had a clean sack. OJ Howard made a touchdown catch that was in double coverage, but by the time the ball got there, it was actually triple coverage because the safety had peeled off his man to come over to try to help. So, uh, you know, Howard made a triple coverage touchdown catch. Godwin looked good, but then Godwin dropped like two deep balls. Howard dropped a deep ball, but then Howard also dropped, or excuse me, also caught a deep ball that wasn't quite for a touchdown. So it was a very up and down as far as receivers go. With no tackling to the ground, once again, it's sort of hard to tell how the defense is doing, especially the front seven, sort of. Like I said, Quan was out. Glanton was in there. He looked good. Really not that much of a drop-off. And they did play some 3-4 because I saw Glanton go off and Beck was staying. I'm like, what? I'm like, is that second string? But no, it can't be because David's there. Because when they're doing first string, Glanton's playing Mike, David's playing Will, and Beckwith is playing Sam. But if Glanton goes off, then who's playing Mike? And then I noticed that they were doing a 3-4 set, basically with three defensive linemen and then two standing linebackers. So anyway, there's that. So these are, like I said, these are things I've just sort of noticed. Anthony DePaula, who got signed a couple days ago, he was a long snapper for 3 years. I noticed he did have a brace on that leg that he hurt in the last game of the season, and he was out. That's a very fast recovery time. Everyone talks about Beckwith, but DePaula, and being an older guy, he came back. Obviously, he doesn't have to put as much stress or strain on it. But he's back, so we still have to figure out who's going to be the long snapper. The guy from Buffalo, I didn't write his name down. Starburns, no, that's not right. Glanton, I don't know. I'm sorry. Anyway, the guy from Buffalo who's been in the league like 8 years, the long snapper at Apalia, and we'll see how that turns out. There was a low snap that Dirk Cutter said in the press conference, but he didn't say who did it, or no one asked who did it, who was snapping, I should say. So I think that's sort of a coin flip, to be honest. It might be just a feeling thing. If you've been in the league, first off, if you make the league as a long snapper originally, you're going to make the snap, 99.99% of the time. You never learn long snapper's name until it's like a bad snap, it's a low snap. And let's face it, on punts and field goals, when's the last time you've seen like a field goal snap like blow over both their guys' heads? As a punter, it happens every once in a while, maybe once a year. It's pretty rare though. So those guys are nearly perfect every time. So it might just come down to who they like better, or who they're more comfortable with, or who the holder's more comfortable with, which is anger. It could come down to that. So that, like I said, that's sort of a coin toss. But DePaul is in a leg brace right now. First out, Alan Cross, big shocker. Last time I got to report on that, I didn't really want to. I just did it for prosperity's sake, to be honest. A Jack Smith sighting, a Jaquez Smith. I saw him the last 2 days. It took me a while to figure it out. I kept seeing this 56, and I would look on. I'm like, I know who that is. Who is it? I know it. And it was like right in the back of my head. And I kept looking on my, my little roster card that they hand out. And I'd go down to 56, and no one was there. And I'd go down to 56, and no one was there. And then finally, I realized. Actually, I didn't, but I'm not going to say how I found out. But at the bottom of the roster card has the IR players. The only player who's been on IR is Jock Smith. So 56, that's who it was. It was Jockey Smith. So he doesn't have any leg brace on. He doesn't seem to be hobbling around. I'm sure he's just healing. He just looks like his toe hurts. Like any injury that he has, it's definitely not evident. Such as like Bond, who still does have a leg brace on. He doesn't look like he's hobbling around either, but he does have a leg brace on. The O-line that went the last 2 days is probably going to be your O-line that starts the Cleveland game, which would be Donovan Smith, then Evan Smith, Ali Marpet at center, J.R. Sweezy, who did practice, came back. He was out the 2 days before, but practiced that last day. And then their putting Kevin Pamphile out there. There was sort of this discussion back and forth, like what they're going to do if a tackle goes down. Are they going to go to Wester? Are they going to go to Benenocht? Or are they going to move Kevin Pamphile? That one day a year where they get to, where I guess the beat reporters and the media guys get to interview all the assistant coaches all at once, all at one day. I guess it's not really all at once, but in one day they get to interview all these guys, and I think there's a few of them in the room, so you got to sort of bounce around. One of the things I did hear was George Warhop, and this was like way back, before OTAs when this interview happened. He said that, Kevin Pamphile, he's the next tackle up. So it's not surprising that they did practice, Wester out there, and they did practice Ledkey out there. Benenocht got some time in there during the game, but he's been banged up. He hasn't practiced since the Jags game, so he probably would have got some time out there. But now when it's sort of push come to shove, like, okay, we need our starters in for these 3 quarters, those last 2 practices, it was Kevin Pamphile. No McCoy on the last day, and I hinged on it. I told you about it the first time. He was in full pads. He just didn't participate in any drills, didn't practice. You kind of thought maybe it was him taking a vet day. It's like he's not hurt, he's not injured. But the day before, he sort of did. He fell on the ground. A couple people fell on him, and he hobbled off. But I'd seen that before. I saw him, sort of walk off holding his elbow. And then about 15 minutes later, he was back in there. This time, he never came back to practice, didn't practice the next day. And it's reported today by Rick Stroud that he's going in for MRI, like I said earlier, on the hip groin area. So the Bucs don't think it's serious, but I don't know. I just don't trust any of that stuff until it comes out. I'm also a Tampa Bay Rays fan. It seems like every time they say a guy, oh, he's held out. No, he's fine. It's just day to day. And the next thing you know, he's down for a month. So it seems like every time it's like, oh, it's day to day. Don't worry about it. He'll be back in the lineup tomorrow. And he's not. He's out for a month. So I sort of feel the Bucs are sort of going in that direction, as in, we are not going to tell you anything about the injuries because we don't have to. And I don't have a problem with that. But so you just basically have to wait with bated breath until they become official. The results of the test and the injury become official when they have to report them, which really won't start till, I think, injury reports won't have to start till Wednesday before the Miami game. They'll have an injury report Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Which of those are, I don't want to say fun to keep an eye on, but it sort of helps when, if you're in too deep like I am, and you probably are since you're listening to this, you can look at the other team's injury reports and start picking apart like matchups, like, ooh, this person could have a good day because they're on their third string, right guard this week, or this person could have a good day because, they got a rookie cornerback who's starting because they're normal guys out. So those are always, one thing I don't want to use, fun to look at, interesting to see, to sort of, if you plan in your head to where maybe Mike Smith or Dirk Cutter might attack the other team's opposing offense or defense. And finally, Dante Dye was back. I said on the last journal that don't forget about Dante Dye, the 5th wide receiver option. And because they hadn't gotten rid of him, and the next day I wake up, I go to camp, and there he is. He's dressed, and he's out there practicing. He looked okay. He didn't have any drop balls, but you can tell he hasn't moved in a while. He looked a little more clunky than everybody else, not as quick in and out of the breaks. His body control was a little lacking. But nothing where, he didn't look like a fish out of water. It just, he didn't seem as fluid or athletic as he normally is. And, he's just knocking off a little bit of the rust, so I'm not really shocked by that. And as far as practice goes, so these are sort of the things I picked up. Shaq Hill, who was a receiver they picked up, I think during the first week of training camp, when they released the kid from Boise, Spurbeck, I think it was. We had 2 of those guys in camp, like 2 kind of Spurbeck, Spurlocks. Anyway, one of those guys they injured released early, and Shaq Hill has been in camp since then. and I just kind of wanted to, take a peek at him. I don't think he has any chance in hell of making the 53-man roster, but I like the way he catches the ball. He sort of snatches it out of the air. He doesn't let the ball come to his hands. He has his hands go to the ball. And it was just something that I noticed and I liked. Once again, like I said earlier, there's pretty much drops everywhere. Everybody dropped the ball, just about. But then there were some big plays as well. So could be the fatigue of camp of going, day after day after day, without, only one. Like they're playing football 6 days out of the week, for a month. That's only 4 days off in the month. That'll get to anybody. They ran a lot of time-sensitive drills, things like you have no timeouts. You're on the 30, the 30s. You have 70 yards to go for a touchdown, and there's like a minute 15 on the clock. Go. Like they ran those things like that a lot that day. They ran a sideline protect drill, which you've seen it on TV, but this was like. The drill was sort of Hail Mary-esque range, but not quite as time. So you'd be around. I'm explaining this terribly. The offense is on their 40. They have no timeouts, and there's like 20 seconds left. So probably less, probably like 15 seconds left. Now you could probably get 2, maybe 3 plays off if you keep hitting, those 17. 18 yard sidelines out. So the defense was set up where there was a linebacker, cornerback, and a safety, and they were all guarding the sideline. And there was nobody in the middle. And when I mean nobody in the middle, I mean nobody in the middle of the field. So the situation obviously was if there was not enough time to run, a 20-yard seam route, catch it, get up there and spike the ball. Like there was not enough time. Like you either had to get out of bounds, you had to get out of bounds to stop the clock. That was the only way you're going to have enough time to pick up a big chunk and get the clock stopped so you can run another play. And I've never seen that in practice, so it was just really weird to watch because they don't tell you what's coming. You don't know the situation. There's no time and clock, so everything's sort of surprise. Now, if you're watching a game and you see this defense come out of the field, you're not really surprised because you know that, there's 8 seconds left and they're, 70 yards away. They're going to have to try a sideline thing or a trick play. So you're not too surprised when you sort of see that defense hit the field. When you're sitting in the stands, there's no clock. You have no idea what the down and distance is. You're just sort of watching. All of a sudden the guys line up and there's nobody in the middle of the field for 70 yards. It sort of takes you by surprise. Let's see what else happened. On punt returns, this you could tell was a serious day for punt returns because only Reedy and Hump were back there. So it looks like Adam's going to be the punt return guy, and Bernard Reedy's putting himself in a good position to be the 5th wide receiver because they don't have sort of a second backup. Now, if it was like Hump, Reedy, and Godwin, like somebody you knew was going to make the team besides Hump as the backup, then you're going, maybe Reedy's chances aren't too good. But since it was just Hump and Reedy, and he has had some good punt returns, and also what sort of helped him out, there was no Josh Huff back there, but he was out, to be fair, I should say. Josh Huff was out for today's practice. But so the only 2 back there on punt returns, were Adam Humphries and Bernard Reedy. And this was good. I'm sure you've seen, if you follow the Bucs closely, which obviously you do, because once again, you're listening to this podcast. Folk went 5 for 5. You probably know that. But what you don't know is Jason Light's out. Jason Light is out there most days. But he was sort of behind. He's always playing deep safety prevent defense, no matter which way the ball's going. That's just where he stands in the field. He doesn't stand on the sidelines. He stands, like 50 yards off the ball, depending on which way the ball is going. Usually he's on the defensive side. But he was behind Folk, probably like, 10, 15, 20 yards. And when Folk banged like that 51-yarder, Donovan Smith picked up Folk. You've seen him do it a few times. He sort of like presses him in the air and then drops him like, yay, good job. And everyone came out and sort of patted Folk on the head. And Jason Light, was smiling ear to ear and gave like a pat, the old double pat on Folk's back. I think personally, like one pat is to tell someone that you're behind them. You're coming through, like tap, excuse me. The double pat is like, oh, hey, good to see you. Jason Light patted Nick Folk like 7-8 times on the back, and it seemed like every pat, his smile got bigger and like a weight lifted off his shoulder. So it was like, good job. And then like he thought about it and he went 5-5, one from 50 plus. Then it was like another double pat. Good job. And he's like, wow, this might work out. Good job. And then, he just kept getting like more and more elated as like it was running, the scenario was running through his head very quickly about what this, 5 for 5, and they're all in the skinny post too, what this 5 for 5 on the skinny post sort of meant. And I just thought that was funny, to see Jason Light yes, finally. We have a kicker, and it's something he's been trying to solve since he got here. He was also trying to solve, the fullback situation. He drafted, Joey Fall. No, he's a fullback out of Hawaii. Joey Esafasu? Joey Faalasu. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names sometimes. I apologize. And then the year after that, he drafted Danny Vitale out of Northwestern, who was more of a pass-catching tight end. Joey was more of a fullback or blocking, running slash fullback, and Vitale was more of a pass-catching fullback. I think the falling of O.J. Howard in 19 has sort of ended that search for the fullback, because he has a guy now that can block and catch very well. And then, of course, you have Cameron Brate. So I don't think an active looking for a fullback to fill that spot is going to be, that sort of spot has now on the 53-man roster has disappeared. Like, you don't sort of need a very good blocking and very good pass catching fullback, because now we have a very good blocking, very good pass catching tight end. But he's also been trying to replace kicker. He actually, Kyle Brenza, he traded for him. Went up in the second round, traded some draft picks. He'll get Roberto Aguayo. This has sort of been the other position he's been chasing. Now, don't get me wrong, I don't think Nick Folk is the long-term answer. But, I wouldn't be surprised if Nick Foltz is here for, like, maybe another 2 years. Gets a job next. If he does fine this year, gets a job next year, then a third year, and then we'll kind of see where we're out there as far as, like, age and leg strength and all that type of stuff. Now it brings us to the end of practice. Once again, Winston, Brate, Howard, they're over there doing their thing. Alan Cross showed up just a few seconds later, and they kept doing their red zone drills, their timing drills. You might want to look for Howard and Brate in the red zone early and often this year. Then as teams start to adjust to it, then you can start, doing Deshaun Jackson, Adam Humphries sort of crossing patterns, them being so small, getting lost in the wash with maybe the line pushing one way and them coming back across and getting, like I said, lost in the wash. And then, of course, you always have Mike Evans, on the fade routes, corner routes, or just to, get in front of the cornerback and put him on his back, just box him out. The Masked Avenger, I was calling, that wide receiver, I couldn't tell who it was, and I promised you I'd look. The wide receivers all went into a huddle, and I could only see Hump and Reedy were the only two numbers that were facing me. And before they got out of the huddle, every single player took off their shoulder pads. So I could not tell. What I was hoping was the player would jog over to the area where, Winston, Brate, Howard, and Cross were, and then peel off his shoulder pads, and then, start running routes. But he never went over there anyway. Like, there was no masked Avenger day. So there's two practices before where there was this receiver who was taking advantage of the extra throwing time with Jameis Winston. I can't tell you who it was because the first two times he didn't have shoulder pads on. I'm like, and then the last day I'm like, I'm going to find out who this is. I'm going to keep an eye on all the wide receivers. And then, they basically just did a shell game on me, and they all stood up, and they all didn't have their pads on. But whoever that was never went over that very last day. Also, the jugs machines were out. Tevin Westbrook, the tight end, like sprinted over there. Like as soon as the practice huddle broke, he was the first guy over there. He was over there by himself, for probably 30 balls he caught before some other guys went over there. It started to straggle over there, and a second jug machine started working. Once again, McNichols and Quiz were out there catching passes. Peyton Barber joined them on that last day. All the cornerbacks got together. It went to field 3, and they were actually running drills after practice. So I don't know if that was like a punishment, like you guys had a bad day, or that was just a separate install they were working on, or some drill that they just wanted to get in that day. That the DB coaches saw that they weren't sharp on, so they were just going over it again, or just reinstalling it, or reinstilling that this is what they wanted to do. And finally, Stevie T was running gassers on field 3 all by himself. So that was about the last thing I saw. So that brings an end, and just brings me up to my closing. Becoming a sad, sad day for me. Okay, this is it. The last segment of the last entry of Training Camp with Ren. Once again, I just want to remind you about, if you like what I have to say, I'll also be writing articles for the Peter Plank and for What the Buck. I have this really cool article on What the Buck that I've been doing some research on for a few weeks now. Not like every day for hours. I just, 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I've been tinkering with it, trying to exactly how I'm going to get it out on the page. But I think it's time that the NFL gets a minor league system. And this is my idea how to do it, where to do it, what time of year to have it, how it would work with the teams, and all that sort of things. Basically a blueprint of just sort of hand it to Roger Goodell. I mean, it's not that detailed, but sort of hand it Roger Goodell and go, here's a very good starting point for the new minor league system for the NFL. So I'm excited to get that one out. Once again, I want to remind you that Sunday night will be the InstantCast, not Saturday night. Brent's probably not going to get home till, probably close to midnight. Probably later than that. See if the game starts at what, 7? No. Yeah, game starts at 7, I believe. And then ends at 10. Yeah, so, midnight, 1 o'clock, maybe even later, closer to 2 o'clock for him. So Sunday night, 9 o'clock, the InstantCast will be, it's a live call-in show where we get your reactions to the Cleveland game. Should be a good show because we get to see the starters for 3 quarters. Really get to see, is this offense can move the ball at will, as it appears like it could in the first 2 weeks. And I think this is going to be the biggest challenge for them defensively. I've talked about this sort of in the main show, the mothership show, the Petercast. I like what Cleveland's doing. Like, they tore everything down to the studs. They kept the guys who they really wanted, really collected a lot of draft picks, totally rebuilt that offensive line, have their young quarterback, have some very exciting pieces on defense. Their defensive line is young and athletic. Their linebackers are young and fast. So I definitely think they're trending the right way. And I think the Browns defense is a lot better than they're getting credit for right now. And I think that's going to be evident Saturday night, or not. The Bucs go up and down and run right all over them. But I watched that Giants game just sort of I was like, hey, we play the Giants. We play them early. Let's take a look at the Giants. And Cleveland just shut them down. I mean, just shut them down. Uh, they couldn't move the ball against them. So I'm wondering. I want to see if it was just an anomaly or the Giants, offensive line is really going to be that much of a hindrance, and sort of where we sit. And like, it sounds like a joke, like, oh, you're going to measure yourself against the Browns. Well, mark my words, like this defense is good, and they're young, and they're fast, and they're hungry, and I like what their front office is doing as far as rebuilding the team. Also, we have a couple other podcasts I just want to get in here real quick before I sign off. Talking Knocks, we do that live, another call-in show just like the InstantCast. It's under the InstantCast platform. It's called Talking Knocks, directly after every showing of HBO. So that would be 11 o'clock Eastern. We go on through the Mixler, Mixler.com. It's free. You can just go to the website on your desktop or your laptop, or you can actually download on your phone and listen and even chat. You can do the live chat on your phone. Like I said, Mixler.com, Mixlr, weird spelling. And we take calls, It's like we talk about what we just saw in Talking Knocks. And that's always a fun show. Runs about an hour or until, the phone calls. It always goes an hour, but if we keep getting phone calls, we continue it. Sort of the same thing we do with the InstantCast. And then, of course, the main show, the Petercast, will soon be going to a weekly show. We've been doing it every 2 weeks during this whole entire off season. Now, once the regular season ramps up, we'll be going, of course, every week, and then of course we'll have the InstantCast show as well. So basically, we'll be having 2 podcasts every week. So that's what's going on as sort of the Petercast umbrella of podcasts that are out there. I just want to finish off to say thanks. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to What the Buck for, getting me one of those passes on sort of that VIP only day. Thanks to Brent, the co-host and creator of the Petercast. He got me a ticket to that second, VIP event, practice event, I should say. All the writers that took the time to talk to me, Greg Allman, Scott Smith from who's the senior editor and head writer of Buccaneers.com. You see him on the training camp presented by Miller Lite shows. They always do that. And then during the week, I know it's not, it's just, I think it's Buccaneers Live. Him and Casey are on there. Roy Cummings, I sat next to him almost every single day. He was extremely gracious. I know I said What the Buck. I should say Derek Fournier from What the Buck. Sat with him all the time. We had lots of very good discussions. Lee DeKemper from Joe Buck's Fan almost sat, he was there almost every day. All the guys from the Pewterport, they showed their faces up there. I talked to at least one of those guys every single day. Mark Cook, Scott Reynolds, Trevor Sikkema. So I want to thank those guys for actually, being patient. I listened a lot. I didn't talk a lot because, I want to make sure that I want them to sort of start the topic if I have any thoughts on it. I can't imagine how many questions they get bombarded with on, Twitter and Facebook and social media about, what's happening with this and what's happening with that. So I sort of wanted to respect their privacy, but, they're right there. It's like, what do you want me to do? I got to do it. But all of them were very gracious. They're all very nice. Thanked me, if like any of the podcast stuff came up or any of the writing stuff came up, they were like, good luck with that. I'll check it out. So once again, thank you to all of them. And finally, thank you to the listeners. You guys, like I said earlier, we sort of started this on a whim. I was hoping, for a couple hundred downloads, a couple hundred listeners per episode, because a lot of them are back to back to back to back, and they start to cannibalize each other. It's sort of hard to keep up with a pod, every single day, unless it's like 10 minutes, 20 minutes tops. And these have been running, 30 minutes on the low side, but they've run, a lot of them run in the 45, 48, 50 minute, even 50-minute range, and the numbers have been very good. Double, triple of really what I was expecting, and quite a few of you have DM'd me on Twitter, or straight up just tweeted at me, thanking me for doing this, and you're welcome. Thank you for listening. It's a lot easier to sort of crawl out of the bed at 6 in the morning when you just fell asleep like 4 hours ago. Like I said, it's not a poor me thing, but if there's only, if I was only getting like 50 downloads, 20 downloads per episode, would it really matter if I just stayed in bed today? No, I would still go. I would probably still go to practice, but would it really matter if I didn't gather all my notes together and sort of get my outline together, and put the pod out there? Are really those 13 people going to be totally disappointed? But like I said, there's a lot of you have downloaded and a lot of you have listened, and thank you so much. And I know Brent thanks you. And we're going to have a lot of great content coming for you this year. We have some really cool guest lines up on the main show. Of course, the InstantCast, it seems to be getting in popularity. Honestly, early on, if we got a call, we were ecstatic. Now, the phone starts ringing before we even go live. We have for like call us back in 5 minutes. Call us back in 5 minutes. So everything seems to be turning up roses, as it is turning up roses for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It's going to be an exciting year. I'm also very excited about this massive tailgate and stadium walk up and sort of coordinated chant that's going to take off and really put the teams at a disadvantage, visiting teams at a disadvantage. So I'm rambling a bit. I'm just going to finish off with saying thank you so much for listening and downloading. I appreciate all the kind words. Everyone has been great this training camp season, I guess I'll call it. And, we're going to finish like we always do. Go Bucks!